All right, good morning. Welcome to our channel. So, I want to talk to you guys about being a Section 8 landlord. Now, I know many of our channel, most of you are tenants looking for solutions for housing and vouchers. And I also know there's a subsequent market for those of you that could be a potential landlord out there. And so I want to make a video because I see an alarming rate of videos coming out from house flippers and investors wanting $5,000 and $10,000 to buy their subscriptions and books and other bullshit. And I can be honest, I've been a consultant at the federal level for 26 years. I'm now retired as of January, and in no circumstance should you ever pay any of these guys. They're not consultants. They don't know policies, procedures, administrative plans. I've got clients that are coming to me and they've been ripped off. So I'm just telling you, look, I'll give you the information you need in the video. You don't need to go through all those crazy things with these actors on YouTube. Okay. So let's start from the beginning. I am the owner of Section8Consulting.com. I operated for around 26 years. I retired in January. I still do short appointments, and I'm going to put up a QR code here for you guys. Let your camera focus on that QR code, and you should be able to navigate. If you've got questions, you can always book a short appointment. They're very reasonable. I think around $45. So I'm gonna go over a list of things you're gonna need to prepare yourself for. One, let's talk about market conditions. If you're intent on spending money to purchase homes this year to become a Section 8 landlord, do not do that. Okay. There have been a lot of budget cuts, and so it would be unwise for you to invest in properties and take on that kind of risk, especially during this administration. Okay, so don't do that. However, if you are a landlord that already has properties in place that you own, it may be very well worth trying, or at least looking at whether or not you can potentially become a landlord and see what the market risks are going to be. What I'm going to say again is these are not the right conditions for this year and possibly the next few years for you to become a Section 8 landlord if you're going to pull money out of the bank and invest in a home. Okay. Anybody trying to tell you otherwise is a fool. So in perspective here, if you own several properties and you want to try the market with very little risk and you own the property already, I'm going to advise a couple of things. One, you need to reach out to the PHA or Public Housing Authority in your area, and you're going to want to request a landlord's packet, which would apprise you of their policies and procedures going forward for becoming a Section 8 landlord. You do not need to purchase that from some moron on YouTube. Okay. Number two, before you start your venture, you need to understand not just market conditions, but you also need to determine whether or not this would even be worth your time. Is the rent that you would get be worth the time to rent the property? And there's a lot of confusion behind this, so I'm going to unravel it. HUD, being a federal agency that oversees the public housing authorities, issues fair market rates. That is a wish list of pricing. Okay, that is if you had the best possible conditions, and that's if the housing authority agrees to those prices. Then, second to that, you got fair market rates basically for the PHA, their published rates. And again, that's all fantasy. That is if you are in the best possible condition, home in the right zip code at the right time, and you had a very favorable housing quality inspection. You cannot depend on those numbers either. If you go and dump a bunch of money into a home, okay, and you sign off and become a homeowner, and then you go run to the PHA expecting them to pay you what they're showing you on their listed fair market rates, they're not going to do that. The reality of it is most of them use software that'll pull on comps, and those comps will be, they say half mile. The comps are going to be looking at are directly on that street. So if you want to do preliminary search, go on Zillow and then type in the zip code for your address. And if it shows average rents for that area is $2,800, you might start to think, well, there's where I'm going to land if I were to rent this property. But that's not true. Then you get some more bad advice, and that would be the half mile comp. Housing authorities are not looking at half mile comps. You need to look up and down that exact street. So if you've got 45 homes on one street and the average rental rates you look at rents, and you've got rents of 2,000, 2,500, 2,600, 2,800, 1,100. You average those numbers, and whichever comes the lowest is what is pretty much going to offer you. Now, many of you are going to be fortunate in the circumstances. Roughly 60 to 70% of the PHAs right now, typically you can just call them and then run the address by them. Hey, I live at 21 Oak Street, and here's the zip code. What are the fair market rates you've been offering up and down this particular street? And they'll usually tell you up front. Now, 30% of the housing authority will pretend like the housing quality inspection is what matters most, and they're not going to tell you anything. So you go and spend money, or you already have a property on the street, and you can't even find out until the last minute when you're already super involved. So the most reliable way is not these fair market rates. Like I said, those are ideal delusional conditions for a home. The best way to determine it is average all the rental properties on the street, and whatever the average median rate is pretty much what they're going to offer you, probably 3% less than that, especially under current conditions, okay? It's critical that you get your landlord packet or the landlord information directly from the PHA's website whenever possible. And I'm going to go over a list of things. It's been a while since I made a video regarding this topic. And let me tell you guys, so you're going to probably think, well, on what authority do I speak? Beyond being a consultant at 26 years at the federal level, I could also work with multinational companies, Canadian companies that own 2,500 homes, multinational buyers that spend $40 to $90 million in Los Angeles, and many more. This is why I'm very suspect when I see house flippers and investors make videos. Oh, I've got 400 homes. No, you don't. Who are you bullshitting? You don't own that many homes, because I've dealt with big companies and they can barely afford to have that many homes. And so what you're seeing is a lot of entertainers. You know, one day they're a party clown, the next day they're expert house flippers. And, this is not to upset house flippers. There's many of them that operate very ethically. But what I'm saying is, if you're buying a subscription to a plan that's going to take $5,000 to $10,000 from you, and these people aren't willing to sit on the phone with you for 30 days, then you don't pay them shit, okay? A real consultant is going to consult you over a month period for maybe $1,000 to $1,200. And what I mean over a month is you have open conversation throughout the month to advise. Anything beyond that, guys, you're getting ripped off, okay? If you're getting ripped off, call me. I can help you. And I even do a lot of the research for you guys so you understand the market conditions, where to find a property. And then we look at other things that are involved here. And as I mentioned, verifying rents with the PHA when they offer it. Now, the market research, look, now you've determined you've got a property that's rental, whether you're going to buy it or not buy it, or you already own it. And so you're out here and you're looking at these properties, and just because you find a row of properties that are worth investing in a one-horse town doesn't mean that there's any vouchers out there. So trying to find the market density, how many vouchers has the housing authority issued? How many have gone unused? For how many bedrooms would or each voucher worth? So if they've issued 500 vouchers, 100 are left unused. Of those 100, are there five properties that have a 3-bedroom, or there are 30 that have a 2-bedroom? And I'm going to be very clear. Your best bang per buck in terms of houses and rental and sizes, because the way housing authorities structure their fair payment standards, you're going to want your best investment value is probably going to be studios, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom, because anything past 2.2, what ends up happening is the housing authority lowers the standard by nearly 75%, sometimes 50, sometimes 75. So 1-bedroom, you get a max value at $1,000, right? Then you get 2-bedroom, you're right at about $2,000. And I'm just making up the numbers here. Then when you get to that 3rd bedroom, all of a sudden the housing authority wants a big discount. Now they're only going to throw in another $500, and it gets worse to more bedroom. So while you may view a large payment for a 6-bedroom house as this amazing thing, you're actually losing money on your return on investment the larger the property is. Not to mention the vast majority of properties that are rented and what's needed and what the most vouchers are being issued for is going to be studio 1s and 2s, not 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s. So you need to pay attention to that, unless you just like being Catholic charities, right? You buy a big house and then you're running it for way under market. Incentives, guys. Remember that word. Bookmark this video. Incentives. Many housing authorities across America uh, aren't very big. And if you happen to be in one of those areas and they struggle to be able to own properties as project based, then they depend on the local market or independent landlords to fill in the gaps. One thing's very clear: there is never, ever, at any time in the history of Section 8, is there any circumstance where there's not a need for a landlord. And neither is there ever a circumstance where every voucher is ever used. In fact, I would tell you that around the country, only half of all vouchers are ever used. The other half of people never find a place to live. Okay. Same thing with rentals. And so you're not going to have a problem there. It's the problem is going to be is can you get the you're going to be able to rent your property for the price that people can afford, and whether or not you can find the appropriate candidate to rent. And I can tell you, multifamily is usually a pretty good idea when you could pick up a little inexpensive property with 5 or 6 units in it, right? That way you're able to pull as many people into one geographical area. Now I've got landlords, oh yeah, well I own properties 900 miles to the left, to the right, and this and that. Look, if you can't get to your property, you can't drive to it within an hour, then you're already making a stupid decision. Okay. That's not going to work very well. And many of you guys, I understand you found success in the ordinary market. Section 8 market's a lot different. Just because you become a millionaire in terms of being a landlord in the open market where people have a paycheck rather than a voucher doesn't mean that your wisdom is going to necessarily pour into being a Section 8 landlord. You'd be foolish to do that. There's guys that spend about $50 million that I dealt with in California. In the beginning, I consulted them, and we were doing well with it. And then eventually, on their own authority, they believe because, well, I'm independently wealthy because of what I know, my knowledge. Therefore, I don't need anybody's fucking advice. And so, as my advice fell on more deaf ears later in the game, the more and more that project got fucked up. Eventually, they end up losing their ass. Point is, guys, just because you're successful in the open market where you have tenants that are paying for normal jobs, it doesn't equate your experiential wisdom to Section 8. Section 8 is a different animal altogether. And so you would be very smart for taking the advice of somebody that has 10 or more years of experience. Okay. So back to those incentives, many of the housing authorities that are desperate to have the clients that are walking around with vouchers they can't use, they may offer cash incentives for every 12-month lease that you're able to sign up in your property or multiple properties. They may offer anywhere from $500 to $5,000 as a sign-up bonus, and so that's a good deal. I know one property, they had 500 units. They bought the building, 500 units, and it was in California, and the housing authority was offering $5,000 per hit. So walk-in day, they did very well. I mean, the numbers 5,000 times 500 is a very large number, and so their walk-in day, they were above ROI. I know they want to tell you guys, look, if you go out and invest in a property and it takes you more than approximately 3 or 4 years to pay that property off based on what you're getting in rent, then you've already made a bad decision because you're sitting on a note. Okay. Maximum line, if you're a patient person, do not push it greater than 7 years. After that, when you approach 7 years to get your money back, then you're not in the right game. You're making a bad decision. So those incentives are many kind. They can cover everything from the first month of rent while you're waiting for the housing quality inspection. They'll cover rent while the tenant ain't even there. Others may offer cash value on that for every person, every occupancy you meet. So you got 10 units and you manage to rent 3 of them. Then if they're offering 500 or 1,000 value part of that, then you'll get deposited that the following month. Others will insure against damages and other things. And so you need to inquire about that. This is an ask and toll situation. The housing authority is going to teach you that. They're going to presume that only the real professionals would understand to bring that up and then question them about that. Otherwise, they won't offer you anything. So you need to directly describe what you're looking for and then see if they'll offer you something. If you have more than 20 units or 20 properties, you may be able to negotiate your own deal with them, because a lot of them at that point, you're considered a very serious landlord, and many PHAs will make reparation to you if you're able to negotiate. So moving on from there, we got information and forms. That's a landlord packet. You're going to need those information and forms, and you also need to understand that, look, sometimes you guys are from other countries, okay? Maybe you're from Vietnam, maybe you're from Iran, maybe from North Korea. Maybe in North Korea, you could kick down the door and then drag the tenant out by a chair, beat them with a bat. Look, a lot of shit that goes on, possibly in your own country, is not going to be permitted here in the U.S. I know that seems like an odd thing to say, but I see a lot of this happening from people that are from different countries, believe they can just roll it, blow out the windows, go in with a shotgun. You either pay rent or I'm going to shoot you, kind of deal. And so I warn you to make sure you follow Code of Federal Regulation and do not violate your tenant rights. You cannot cut off the power, lock the doors, beat people up, shoot them. You can't sell them. You can't kidnap them. Okay. So look, I understand from our Asian clientele, maybe our Middle East clientele, there's a lot of shit that goes on that may be perfectly permissible in Mexico, where you can hang the tenants from the bridges if you don't like them. But look, you cannot do that here. And so you need to make sure you understand your rights and responsibilities as a landlord and not try to conduct business like you're in Iran. Okay. Not that I'm trying to pick on any one country or any nationality. I'm just picking it choice here. I've seen a lot of odd shit happen from people that potentially live in another country and then, of course, invest in the country. I just want to make sure you're following U.S. law with that, okay? And I understand it. That's a great thing when you can go out there and demand rent with a shotgun. Maybe if you're, in Saigon, but it's not really going to work out here. You can end up in prison. And if you get in prison here, we call that Section 9. 3 hots and a cons in federal prison means you get free rent in the prison. You don't want that, okay? Moving on from there, voucher types. Look, guys, there are lots of programs and vouchers out there. You need to understand what your tenants are carrying. If they have a request for tenancy, it means that is their voucher. Those vouchers could be issued based on a person being a domestic violence victim, HIV or AIDS under HOPA. They could be a veteran. They could be homeless. They could be a lot of different things under a lot of different programs. And so some of those vouchers would pay more than others. Some vouchers come with more problems than others. In other words, some vouchers are issued to subcategories of people that may be recovering from drugs and alcohol and may carry a higher risk level. So understanding the broad range of programs and vouchers is extremely important, and you shouldn't be too biased there. And let's talk about prejudicial and biased behavior with this. The 80s was a great time for eyewitness news and other news agencies, right? Everybody's a crackhead with 13 children, 15 dogs, and 20 chickens. And therefore, everybody's got this fabulous story of why you shouldn't rent to a Section 8. Look, that's not reality, okay? You're focusing on 0.5% of all people. People not going to sit on a waiting list for 45 years and then go and smoke meth the minute they walk in there and then rip out the cabinets. In fact, the majority of YouTube videos I see of these little young, cutesy little landlords talking about this, showing their house with all the shit ripped out, or people that go to abandoned homes, and what they do is they play on your emotional response. In other words, they don't even own the home. They go find an abandoned home, they go in there and they start videoing and pretending that's their home and then saying that some Section 8 renter rolled out. There's so many fake videos regarding that because it creates a sense of urgency, and it gets people to have an emotional tone. And so I would tell you that out of 500 units I dealt with maybe 2 years ago, I only had 2 problematic tenants. And we ended up moving both tenants from different apartments across the place. And it was more that one had mental health issues and the other one couldn't shut the fuck up. And so you can't have them next door to each other. We didn't know that at the time. So we moved them apart. Now we got one person that can take their clothes off and on all night long in their apartment privately, and the other can go and talk all night long and nobody can hear them because we put them in different apartments. Get prepared for that, because there are lots of Section 8 tenants that will present perfectly normal. They'll wear their Sunday best, but the minute they move in, the weird shit happens. They're entitled to that, okay? We cannot discriminate on the basis of somebody's mental health. In fact, I think some of the best tenants in the world aren't all there. But thing is, you need to make sure they understand the requirements. If you're going to have a mental episode, that you not put that on public display. No running naked around the pool, stuff like that. Other than that, you should consider this. The rent's always on time and they're at least normal and friendly on rent day. Okay. Can't ask more. And let's not even be imaginative. We say that about Section 8, but is that any different than the standard market? There's plenty of people that have a working job, that have plenty of mental health issues, that have as many problems and create as much misery and bullshit as anybody else. So in that reality, people aren't different in perspective of income or mental health or otherwise. So they're not any more different than the person with a job paying rent. So that's why I'm telling you, don't concern yourself as to whether or not a person has mental health, disabilities, and otherwise, because you're going to find that no matter if you're a Section 8 or non-Section 8. Okay, let's look at the next on our list here. Marketing and advertising. Look, I've looked at every medium out there. Don't spend a wild amount of money on that. Okay, first of all, there's always half the vouchers in the county are always going to be unused. Okay, so the people are there. I find best the number one source for running properties is going to be Facebook Marketplace. And look, you guys are taking your Section 8 properties and putting that shit on Zillow. That is not where Section 8 renters don't look a lot on Zillow, okay, or O'Hare or whatever you call it. But I think most of them look for properties in regards to Facebook Marketplace. In fact, I know for the city of Los Angeles, we put up one simple ad, put up the rent. We had 100 responses before 24 hours even ended. Now, of course, there's greater demand there, but I would say start there, okay? Beware of the housing authority being helpful in terms of providing tenants. Look, the housing authority not only issues vouchers, but they also have project-based housing. And when they have problematic people in their own properties, they find ways to get them out. And so when they set up a meeting and they've got hors d'oeuvres there and caviar, a little champagne, and a list of tenants they'd be happy to give you to refer to your property, they're making what used to be their problem your problem. Do not be foolish. Find your own tenants. If the housing authority offers, boy, you're in trouble. It's also worth talking to the VA as well as continuum of care program directors. If you don't know what that is, reach out to my office. Now, these people come with a little bit more sophisticated situations, but they're a lot less problem. Tell you why. Because their lives are more complicated, they often being some of the best tenants out there. And so understanding besides housing authorities, continuum of care program offers vouchers, VA, Veteran Affairs, and HUD-VASH offers program vouchers. And so you can do quite well with that. I want to talk about another category most don't even consider, the Red Cross, FEMA. There are natural disasters, offer rental assistance, different things, so you can benefit from having that. Also, federal witnesses, state witnesses, county witnesses for crimes often can pay 2 and 3 times the rent because they're under federal management assistance. And so you didn't even know those types of options even existed out there. Now you kind of know, though it does change on the market as the years go on. Moving on to the next one. I'll take a sip of water here while I blaze through this. And I've only managed to get 28 people on our channel. That sucks. That's okay. I'm here for y'all's benefit. It doesn't matter if I have 100 people here or not. All right, moving on. Voucher types, marketing, advertising, housing partnerships. That's what I was talking about through Continuum of Care and VA. They can send you a whole host of people that have vouchers that can't use them. And so if the rent amounts match what you're looking to rent the property for, partnering with the Veterans Office could be a great idea because they can backfill your property and meet occupancy very quick. Same thing with Continuum of Care programs, better known as COC. Tenant screening and expectations. Let's talk about tenant screening and expectations. You run the standard stuff. Some of my landlords believe that you're applying for the diamond plus gold card credit. Everybody's low income. Section 8 renters don't have perfect credit or perfect rental histories. You cannot go into this with those kind of great expectations. If you see a client and you run their credit and it meets at least minimum criteria, and you see that they're making their payments on time but have a few blemishes, it's still very much a good idea to consider them as a candidate. Okay. I've seen lots of people with different problems. As long as everything that's a problem on your credit history isn't related to the timing of payment, then I'm generally not worried. Felonies, as long as you're not a sex offender, you're not a meth smoker, shooter, whatever you want to call it, you're not using methamphetamine, and you've not engaged in any form of abuse of an animal, senior, or otherwise human, you would meet the federal rules basically to be rented to if you don't have those issues on your record, okay? If you have further questions, clearly there are more questions and exemptions to that, so you can reach out to my office. By the way, let me go ahead and put up that QR code again. I'm struggling a bit here because of my cats. I'm allergic to cats almost. At least my doctor says I am, and you see what she's doing right now. She's going to town on that chair. So let me introduce my little secretary while I take a little breather here. This is my newest kitten, Diamond. And she's a young gal. She was just out in the yard chasing chickens. And so we call her my little office secretary. All right. Moving on from there, recertification and rental increases. You need to understand that game before you get involved in being a Section 8 landlord. Rental increases can happen every annual, which means an annual reinspection. You also want to figure your housing quality inspections. You can get a federal list for that gives you federal guidelines for housing quality inspection, which you need to meet, as well as get a housing quality inspection list from your PHA. Most of you guys are going to pass that. From there, I believe that should cover the broad strokes of this. Okay, I'm not going to turn this into a 4-hour video to cover this in detail. There are some people who might enjoy doing that, but I'm not. I'm going to check one more page and make sure that we don't have any other issues here that should be covered. Oh, rents, yep. So we covered them all. So last thing I'm going to do is leave you with a QR code for our company. Here we go. You got questions, concerns, or you have issues related directly to becoming a Section 8 landlord, that can be quite a wealth of information after about 26 years in the market. As I mentioned before, you can always reach out to our office if you're having problems or trying to figure out the market for your local area. And so my final advice in this video is going to be, if you're intending on purchasing homes for the concept of being a landlord this year, then you're making a mistake, okay? Funding's very low, and the housing authorities clearly are not going to pay what you would probably have gotten a year ago. If you already own a home, it's worth looking into that and see if the situation is viable. In other words, if you've already owned the property, you're not going to spend too much time, money, or risk looking into whether or not you can proceed. Ow! And she got me right in the ear, too. Good one. So she said, I've got to go. So at least you can check it out. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap this up because she's going to keep clawing my ears, and that's not fun. So I've enjoyed talking with you guys, and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now. I tell you not to do that.